IPMNation.com.
Live from the Transitional Radio Uplink in Cuenca, Ecuador, you're listening to All Natural Being with guest host Henry G. Noel. What's the G stand for? Giddy up on IPMNation.com. Here's Henry.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 348th episode of Brian Brody's All Natural Being, the #1 rated show on IPMNation.com, and brought to you by Transitional Radio. Now, we are live this evening on IPMNation.com, Transitional Radio's Facebook and YouTube pages with Fly on the Wall video, or as Brian refers to it, his shunt cam, on Facebook and on YouTube, with rebroadcasts on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and a whole host of others. Now, we're broadcasting live from this evening from our international uplink studio in Cuenca, Ecuador. And we want to thank our good friends at Wirecast for making it possible for us to be broadcasting this evening and broadcasting globally. We also thank you, our trusted listeners, for without you, there would be no reason for me to be here, so it'd be real quiet. Now, we appreciate those listening live on the radio and those that are listening to our rebroadcast. And we want to thank our Fly on the Wall video listeners. Now, we do find it far more enjoyable having you participating in the thread and sharing your ideas. So all of you listeners from all over the globe, from places just like the United States, Canada, Mexico, the UK, and Ireland, our good friends right here in Ecuador, China, the Philippines, and Brazil, India, Australia, and Germany, Italy, France, Nigeria, Turkey, Japan, Singapore, Thailand, Belgium, Sweden, Israel, South Africa, Egypt, Puerto Rico, Kenya, the Netherlands, Colombia, Peru, Greece, Poland, Cambodia, and New Zealand. Thank you all for investing your valuable time with us. We really do know and realize that there are many, many other things that you could be doing out there with spending your time. So the fact that you're spending it with us, I wish to thank you all. So it is great to have you here, and thank you. My name is Henry Noel. I'm guest hosting for the amazing and drainage control expert, Brian Brody, and I'm thrilled to be filling in for our virtual hitchhiker. So from 2 degrees south of the equator, where the water drains in the counterclockwise direction, we want you to understand your life is still your jungle. And you, in spite of what you think and believe, get to carve your own path and hack out the underbrush, suppressing your passions and trying to learn. Why cow down to the sport of others? You were dealt this hand, so why not play it with all the zeal you can amass and play it the way you always dreamt you would play it if you had the chance. And no one is more qualified to control your life than you, so why cave in to pundits who presume they are? Why allow the options and the opinions of others to derail you from your all-natural being? Don't get caught up in all of the foolishness that others use to dehumanize you. Use your primal scream to stand tall, proud, front and center, and don't place yourself in second place. We're here to ensure you have your rock star moment as your friendly force, placing your heart's highest priority top of the list, reinstating the true wisdom and wallop of your inner whisper to terminate the turmoil in your life, limit the liability of your lineage, and streamline your sensibility so you can face this crazy world head on and out brutal. All this so you can bring on your own bold once and for all. So get prepared for audio acupuncture, where we treat all the points of your chronic philosophical pain, providing auricular therapy to reduce your anxiety, medical qigong for your mind, body, and spirit, and Reiki for your rationality, all to provide a natural approach to the medical mayhem we call life. Healing in the nth degree. Now, are you ready? Are you comfortable? Are you relaxed? Do you feel good? Well, then kick off your shoes and let's get started. We trust that everyone has had a good day thus far, and I want to thank you for joining us on this, Tuesday evening. We are taking an assessment of the past 2 years and talking about the successes and the failures, the positive and the negative observations that you have experienced over the past 2 years of listening to this show, and the path that you have taken for the last 2 years, and take a real good look and see how things go and what's been going on, what you've observed, and what you like out of it. So before we get started in tonight's topic of hate, let's get into the thread and see who's visiting with us this evening. So, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the show. Let's see who we've got. Well, I saw they're up there at the beginning. I know Rita's on, so thank you very much, sweetie. I'm glad that you're on. Marcia, good evening. Well, nice to have you here. Wayne, thank you very much. And again, all of your troubles and all of your hassles. I appreciate you getting us through all of this. Candace, good evening. Thanks for joining with us. Okay. Let's see. We have John. Welcome, John. I'm glad to see that you're here. Thank you very much. Again, Candace. And there's Lee Raleigh. Welcome, Lee. I'm glad to see that you're here. So hopefully everybody's had a great day, at least up to now. Anyway, and again, I want to thank you all for joining us. This is it's really a lot of fun to have you all, and this is where I get a lot of my enjoyment, just simply being able to go ahead and just enjoy what you guys have to say over on the thread. Now, tonight we're going to be talking about, hate, and not that I love that subject, but it's one that I think is really necessary and part of our process of being able to change and to also do our self-renewal, our self-assessment, our self-evaluations. I mean, if we harbor hate, then we're not doing a very good job in clearing ourselves and allowing us to change. That is the big key. So tonight we're going to discuss hate. So last evening's show, we talked about fear. We began by talking about what fear is and how to identify the fear. The next, we discovered where fear comes from and the different ways fear is introduced to us. We talked about the different types of fear and how we develop the fears we have. We discussed how we became a victim of fear and the myriad of ways fear affects us. Then we discussed the processes of fear, the processes that fear uses to control us, and how others use fear to control us. And then we talked about the effects of fear as on our psyche, our body, and our spirit. We even talked about how the effects of fear has on your health and the way we live our lives. Then we got into some of the ways we can begin to lessen our fears, ways we can control our fears, and how we can finally say goodbye to our fears. We even discussed how authority figures present information gift wrapped in fear, all to keep us in a state of heightened fear. So now tonight, we continue with part 3 of this series, assessing the past 2 years of our journey through change and self-renewal, as we dive into the abyss to examine up close and personal the most debilitating construct of our lives, hate. And so as we go through this, I'll keep spotting off the thread. Hopefully I can keep up with it tonight. We'll see. Hate to sit here and disappoint my brother, but that's what I'm going to try to do, see if I can keep up with it. So I want to go through and say, yep, hi, bro. And these there, Dana, welcome. I'm glad to see you. He's shaking his fist at me. I love it. That's why I love him, big all might. And Dana said, my son's father hates me, and he was an abuser. I wish him no ill will, but he loathes seeing me. So, even with his child, this is crazy. And yes, Dana, it is, and I mean, I've got the same situation too. So it's I have an ex that just loves me to death too, and it's just fine. I think the death part is probably more appropriate. but but I had the same situation. So let's see. Yes, uses fear. That's it. Uses fear to provoking to get reactions going to go to movement. So there you go. That is the problem. However, I'm concerned for the will. Yes, the kids are always the ones that pay the price for adults, well, acting like children. And that is a real issue that we do face. John Niall, hello, how are you? Good evening. Jamie, good evening. Glad to have you here. Okay, I'm going to bounce off the thread and we'll get back into the topic here and see if we can get things moving here. Okay. All right. Hate is a topic that I'm going to cover from several different directions, as it encompasses a tremendous amount of territory that we exist on. But I will do my best to keep the discussion to the action of hate and not the crossover into the emotions of anger and rage, which is quite easy to do because of the similarities in appearance. But it is my belief hate is the byproduct, the culmination, and the result of the varying emotional degrees of frustration. Now, let's see, just check back. Alice, hello, welcome. Well, thank you, Dana. Thank you. I need all the blessings I can get, without a doubt. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. And again, hi, Alice. And we'll see how things are going. Okay, I can honestly say that on my recent trip, visit back to the U.S. in July, I didn't have to look very hard to find hate. Just about every news story had its roots deeply entrenched in hate. The demonizing of others for believing differently was paramount. Whether it was politicians spewing out venom against each other, seeking to rouse constituent support, or religious leaders pounding the dogmatic books of self-righteously chastising and belittling followers of other faiths, or the embattlement of civilians versus police. Hate was right at my fingertips. I didn't have to go very far to find it. So exactly, let's look at what is hate. That's what we're going to come back into. So, John, hoping for the best, everyone involved. This is just this two-shot pass. There you go. We have all used the word hate many, many times in our lives. I hate that guy. I hate soup. I don't. I like soup. I hate that she hates. I hate you. I hate this job. But what exactly is hate? Well, to define hate, one must use a myriad of words similar to hate. An extreme dislike. I kind of like that one. A very unpleasant. Antipathy. Loathing, intense hostility, and aversion deriving from fear or anger or a sense of injury. That's all well and good, but what's hate? Now, hate is a human trait, as constructs go, I guess, and scientists have identified that what they call the hate circuit, which I found fascinating, in the brain. They say it consists of the medial frontal gyrus, the right putamen, the medial insula, and the premotor cortex. Now, what I found fascinating is that each of these areas of the brain, when tested separately, also activate when thoughts of love are invoked. So why hate circuit? Why hate? So again, what is hate? Now, some say it is anger taken to the nth degree. Others say hate comes from being so pissed off you can't control yourself. Or you have annoyed me beyond my composure. Well, in my opinion, all of that is frustration in one degree or another. I believe frustration is the culmination of when our emotions are fired, totally fired, and we are just frying ourselves, and you just simply are unable to maintain your composure. Frustration is measured in varying degrees of intensity. For example, you're bothered by something or someone. Then you get annoyed with something or someone. And then you get upset by something or someone. And then you get angry. Anger leads you to getting mad. And then you get really pissed off. And then rage sets in. Now, all of these are varying degrees of emotions for frustration. It isn't hate, okay? I'm going to jump to the thread here just to keep up and see where we go before it slips by too fast. Let's see. Got, what's that? Ola Harden morning. Discuss, let's see. Discuss. That's a good one. Rita says, no, and whoops, can't read that one. It's the most negative word. There's the most negative word used. I really try not. I try to turn negative statements around and use positive words. It really makes you stop and think when talking. Absolutely true. Dana says, I'll never give the human capacity to allow me to hate them. Absolutely right. Rita says, got to work on my typing tonight. That's okay. I got to work on my talking tonight. So anyway, I don't believe that hate fits into that pattern of intensity. No, I believe hate is a disease. The action, the result of the emotions, and not an emotion itself. Hate is an infection of the mind, body, and spirit and warps our perceptions. Like the ego, hate is, well, like an entity that was placed within us somewhere, a construct specifically designed for us, we humans. Hate is the culmination, the action, the disease caused by the emotions of anger, rage, and frustration, judgment, discrimination, and fear. Now, there's several directions that we can go at this point. One is to look at infants. Now, they don't hate, and their ego is not developed, and they are unconditionally loved. Second is look at children. Now, they get upset, angry, they have temper tantrums, but they don't hate. Their egos are just developing, and they still love somewhat unconditionally. The third is to look at adolescents. Now, they experience and express hate from wherever it was introduced. Their ego is well on its way to being fully developed, and they express conditional love. Fourth, let's look at adults. Hate is justified, ego is in total control, and love is totally conditional. Sounds pretty oppressive when you think about it. So could there be a correlation then between hate and ego? Now, it's my contention, hatred is a mechanism the ego uses to defend itself. For us, hate is a learned process. It's a learned way for the individual ego to survive. Hatred, fighting, and anger is a way for the ego to get attention and to remove the obstacles that are placed in its way. Okay? We'll go back to the thread. Candace, I'll be infection indeed. Thanks, Dana. Yeah. I'll be totally honest. I absolutely have nothing for baby killers, rapists, abusers, murderers, etc. Okay, I won't argue with you there. Absolutely not. Rita says it's an overpowering feeling that we allow to consume us at times, and those feelings are very hard to get rid of. That's true, absolutely. I learned behavior, absolutely. Well, the reason that we really, let's put it this way, if the whole purpose is to remove obstacles that are placed in ego's way, but if it's a learned process, is it a learned process for ego, or is it a natural process for ego? Marcia says it's a disease. Yes, hate is a disease. Now, the reason we learn to problem solve, okay, is so we can win. And bottom line is there's an issue, we need to learn how to fix the problem, so therefore we win. If an obstacle is in our way, we find a way to remove the obstacle. Now, this is the same process we use to get our way. If the obstacle is keeping us from getting our way, we remove the obstacle. The thinking is by destroying what is in our way, we get our way and we win. So it follows suit. If we remove the obstacle, whether by fighting it, destroying it, or killing it, then we win. Well, ego always must win. and convinces us we must win to preserve our own self-image, which is removing the obstacle, which is why we find reasons to argue, fight, and war. We're removing the obstacles. To justify the removing of the obstacles, we must hate those who place the obstacles in our way, preventing us from winning. This is why there's so much violence in the world today. People use ego-driven hate to justify forcing their own benefits on others, warring, fighting, removing obstacles. It isn't until we decide to change, become self-conscious, self-reflective, and self-renewal, are we willing to stop this pattern and destroy the disease. Now, a quote from Nelson Mandela. He was my favorite person. No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, then they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. Now, the only part of his quote that I don't agree with is that love's opposite is hate. I believe fear is love's opposite, not hate, not hate. But outside of that, I believe Mr. Mandela was spot on with his assessment of us. So, do you hate? Question to you. If you do, what do you hate? Where and when did you begin this hatred? You see, you didn't hate as children, but you hate now. So why the change? What occurred that caused you to begin hating? And why the word hate? Why would we use the word hate? Why not frustrated instead of that? I believe there's a lot of truth in the quote, we learn to hate. And quote, hate is a learned practice. But to say all hate is learned may be a misnomer and very misleading. The reason for this statement is the correlation mentioned earlier about hate and ego. Did ego learn hate, or does ego simply represent hate? I'm not sure. Now, there is no getting around the fact hatred is the scourge of humanity. Hate is completely based in fear, ignorance, and judgment. It is solely focused on our physical, philosophical, theological, psychological, and egotistical differences. It is our inability to stop hatred that keeps us from self-renewal and changing, and has no justifiable place in humanity. Rita says, it is learned from our programming. Yep, it is. Mary Haggerty, hello there. Welcome to the show. I'm glad that you're here. Most of it comes from our tribes, okay? Our in-group, I guess, our peeps, the people that we hang with, the ones that we have most associations with. Now, whether these are our family, our friends, the neighborhood, school, sports teams, gangs, religious institutions, political affiliations, company associations, outside activity groups, organizational memberships, the state that you live in or the country you live in. We are a product of our tribes. We are introduced to these tribes, accepted by these tribes, indoctrinated into these tribes, become active within these tribes, and take on the beliefs of these tribes. Now, I use the word tribes for it could be a community organization. It could be, the Lions Club. It could be just anything like that. But these are our tribes. These are the people that we hang with, and these are the ones that we have the most similarities with. Candace says that I hate horrific inhumanity acts inflicted on any innocent person. Is it a hate, or is it simply something you really just find no sense in them doing, Candace? Because that's really critical. It really is critical. Now, we learn to judge others based on the beliefs of our tribe and begin to compare ourselves to others and other tribes. We quickly learn to focus our attention on the differences between our tribe and the other tribes, and we focus on the similarities within our own tribe. Now, what successfully comes out of this is, are you with us or not? In other words, us or them. The illusions we develop are positive for our tribe, and we create negative illusions about their tribes. We begin to adopt the beliefs, the moral values of our tribe because they're one of us, and we're one of us. We soon see our beliefs and moral values as superior and more desirable to those of other tribes, making the other tribes inferior to us. And we begin to get suspicious of the beliefs and moral values of the members of the other tribes, placing them in a category of misguided, inferior, evil, even non-human. But especially them. They're not us. This is all the justification one tribe needs to solidify its membership against other tribes. Now we see being ostracized as a fate worse than death. For example, they talk to a social media addict who was just unfriended. Man, their world has just ended. So yeah, ostracized is a fate worse than death. And historically, being ostracized meant that you lost the support of the tribe and were put out on your own with no support or protection from the elements, the animals, and other tribes. And this was the proverbial death sentence. You couldn't survive on your own. Now, John says, there's not much that I hate. All the hate that resides within me is from the root idea of be separate from anything. Once you see our interconnectedness, hate is just a figment of our imagination. There you go. Absolutely right, because we are all connected. And I absolutely agree, John. And that's why I don't believe the word hate really sits within you either, because you've gone too far with it. You've grown too much. And just as Candace says, hate, I don't believe that's the right word that you guys use, because if it was hate, you wouldn't be where you are right now. Now, this fear of being ostracized is what creates the bonds of loyalty to the tribe and leads us directly into peer pressure. It takes very little motivation to begin the sizing up process of, are you one of us or one of them? Now, there was a Polish psychologist back in 1997 it's Henry Tafel, and he developed what is called the social identity theory. Now, there were three mental processes involved in evaluating others as us or them, in group and out group. These take place in a particular order. First, there's social categorization, or I like to call it profiling, pretty much. Social identification and social comparison. Those are the three, and it's in that order that this whole thing develops. So what he proposed was the groups, tribes, which people belong to, were an important source of pride and self-esteem. Groups give us a sense of social identity, a sense of belonging to a social world. And being social creatures, this is exactly right up our alley. So in order to increase our self-image, we enhance the status of the in-group, the tribe that we belong to. So for example, England is the best country in the world. That's the belief. There's their belief. All right, that's their tribe. Now, we can also increase our self-image by discriminating and holding prejudiced views against the out-group or the tribe that we don't belong to. For example, Americans, French, and Canadians are just a bunch of losers. So there's your comparison of two tribes or three tribes or four tribes. Now, as a result of this, we successfully divide the world into us and them, based on a process of social categorization or profiling. We put people into social groups. Now, the central hypothesis of social identity theory is that group members of an in-group will seek to find negative aspects of an out-group, thus enhancing their self-image. And I'm going to get to how this ties all into with the topic for tonight. So now, the prejudiced views between cultures may result in racism, and in extreme cases, racism may result in genocide. such as occurred in Germany, Rwanda, and the former Yugoslavia. Now, Dr. Tafel proposed that stereotyping, social categorization, or profiling, however you want to look at it, putting people into groups and categories, is based on a normal cognitive process, the tendency to group things together. In doing this, we tend to exaggerate the differences between the groups, and we exaggerate the similarities within the group, within the same group. So this is especially true when we categorize or profile people. We see the group to which we belong, the in-group, as being totally different from the others, the out-groups. Yet the members within the in-group or the out-groups are seen to be more similar than they really are within the group. So social categorization or profiling is one of the explanations for prejudiced attitudes such as us and them, at least on the mental scale, which leads to groups, to the in-group, and which leads to in-groups and out-groups, us and them. Now, this has been used in experiments in which participants are divided into two groups based on some flimsy, superficial things, such as, well, the results of a coin toss, or perhaps the color of their clothing, the green shirts and the blue shirts. Even this random, meaningless way of dividing people into groups resulted in a tendency to favor one's own group over the other, and to hold self-serving biases about both groups. This grouping is almost automatic. And this is what we are dealing with in the world of hate. Candace says, evil versus good is how I see it. Okay, well, good. There we are. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at some groups, in-groups and out-groups, and see if we can make sense of how the hatred can be created and justified. All right? Northern Ireland, the Catholics versus the Protestants. I think we all understand the hatred that was there at the time and the deaths that occurred because of it. Rwanda, the Hutus and the Tutsis. Even some of the pygmies were slaughtered during their genocide attempt against the Tutsis. Yugoslavia, the Bosnians and the Serbs. Again, very recent history. Germany, the Jews and the Nazis. Can you see how we got two groups, and you can see the hatred where it is? All right? Politics, Democrats and Republicans. Can you see it? Does some of that make sense? Gender, males and females. Sports teams, the Giants and the Yankees, or Alabama versus Florida. These are in groups and out groups, depending on which one you wish to belong to. Social classes, middle class, upper class, the working class. Street gangs, the Bloods, the Crips. Okay, I mean, this is exactly what we're dealing with. It's no different than a gang. The government, CIA, the FBI, NSA, the Pentagon. These are in groups and these are out groups, depending on the side that you're on. And they don't work together. They don't like each other. This is what we are dealing with, okay? Dana says, anything that is designed to harm another living being unintentionally, I despise. I get that. I totally get you. And I agree. I don't say I hate them, but I don't like it. Candace says, Native Americans, what's gone on with them? Absolutely right. It's heinous what has occurred. Again, we have to deal with all of that. That's what we have to get ourselves over. It is not a hate issue. It is simply an issue that we have to learn to deal with. Matt Connerton, welcome. How are you? Marcia, I think that hate is a thing, a feeling that can only exist where there is no understanding. For Tennessee Williams, thank you very much for sharing that, Marcia. I greatly appreciate that. Now, back to this. It doesn't matter what tribe. What matters are the psychological and the egotistical manipulations going on within the tribe that creates the environment for hate to flourish. Okay? Now, the second aspect of his program, his theory was social identification. Now, we adopt the identity of the group that we categorized ourselves with and belong to. So if, for example, you have categorized yourself as a student, the chances are you will adopt the identity of a student and begin to act the ways you believe students act and conform to the norms of the group. Now, there will be an emotional significance to your identification with the group, and your self-esteem will become bound up with the group membership. And that goes right down the line with every group that's out there, whether you are a part of the World Series Championship baseball team, or you're a member of the Crips. It's the same exact process. Nothing is different. Social comparison. This is critical to understanding prejudice, because once two groups identify themselves as rivals, they are forced to compete for the members to maintain their self-esteem. Competition and hostility between groups is not only a matter for competing for resources, like jobs, but also the result of competing for identities. Once you have categorized yourself as part of a group and have identified with that group, we then tend to compare that group with other groups. Now, if our self-esteem is to be maintained, our group needs to compare favorably over the other groups. Now, we categorize objects in order to understand them and identify them in pretty much a similar manner the way we categorize people, including ourselves. In order to understand the social environment, we use social categories like black, white, Australian, Christian, Muslim, student, bus driver, because they are useful. But if we can assign people to a category, then that tells us things about those people. And similarly, if we find out things about ourselves by knowing what the categories are we belong to, we define appropriate behavior by referencing to the norms of the group that we belong to. But you can only do this if you can tell who belongs to your group. And an individual can belong to many different groups. So, roll, tide, roll. And Marcia says, oh, yes. So what I want to do, in conclusion to this, what I really want to try to come up with the end of it is that the result of how we profile, identify, and compare ourselves with others is the basis for fear, discrimination, and judgment. There is no getting around the fact that hatred is the scourge of humanity, that hate is completely based in fear, ignorance, and judgment. It is solely focused on our physical, philosophical, theological, psychological, and egotistical differences. It is our inability to stop hatred that keeps us from self-renewal and changing. There is no justifiable reason for hate in humanity. We are all members of the human race. And that race is the only race on this planet. Until we can refer to each other as fellow humans, we are destined to continue creating categories, profiling, and we will intentionally divide ourselves into tribes. And when you have more than one tribe, you have a conflict. Until we can stop profiling, discriminating, and judging, fear will forever be the driving motivation to encourage hate. And that is where I'll leave that. Because to me, you cannot honestly say that we're changing our vibration, that we are doing everything we can to improve ourselves and change ourselves if we harbor 1 ounce of hate. We cannot do it. It's lying to ourselves. We simply cannot do that. If we hate, then we are not changing. Regardless of what it is that's out there, that frustrates us to no end. And there's no reason we can't be frustrated, but to outright admit hate, then we're not changing. We're not improving ourselves. We're not raising our vibrational levels. We can say all the kumbaya stuff we want to do, but if hate comes out of my mouth, then it ain't happening. Then it's a lie. And so that's why I'm saying hate is destructive. It's destructive, the most destructive word we have in our vocabulary. And it's got to go away. Otherwise, nothing is going to change for us. And this world is destined to be exactly where it is. And it will continue to get worse. As I said, if you can look at every group out there as if a gang, then you get an idea of exactly where the hatred comes from and why it's there. Because we see ourselves differently, and we're not different. We're all the same. We weren't made different. We were made the same. And this is what it's all about. Now, tomorrow evening, I will welcome Lee Raleigh from Sales Copy Academy for Lee Words Wednesday, where we will be discussing whatever in the hell Lee wants to discuss. So we'll find out what he wants to talk about, and that's what we're going to do. So join Lee and I, and get surprised, because I think it'll be a lot of fun to just go through and see what happens with that. But in the meantime, we have any other messages or any other things coming through on the thread. Again, I know hate is such a tough topic. It's such a tough way to go. And it's a hard one to talk about because it encompasses every aspect of our life. We've allowed it to do that because we thought it was the way it was. And that's, we're part of a group. We're part of a sorority or a fraternity, or we're part of a car club, or whatever it is we do to associate with similar, like-minded people, similar things that we do. We have opened ourselves up the element to hate, because somebody has to be superior, and that's where we fall apart. We're not. We are all the same. And until we can really get there, we're going to have a fight with this. I mean, the fears we talked about yesterday, being honest, we talked the day before. And it's really hard to do that. Okay, I got to go back here and see. I don't believe it's right to hate people, but I believe it's right to hate evil. Again, I understand what you're saying. I totally understand what you're saying. But to say that we hate anything, we don't have to like evil. I don't have to accept it. I don't invite it into my house. But I'm not going to hate it. I'm not going to hate anything, because it's not the way to be. It's simply not the way to be. You can dislike it. You can simply disassociate with it. We don't have to be part of that. But the bottom line is evil exists. And because it exists, I tend to try to not acknowledge the fact that it exists. When you hate it, you're acknowledging it and you're giving it power. Therefore, I don't hate it. I don't hate anything. Because the moment I do hate it, I acknowledge that its existence and I give it power. And I give it power over myself. And thank you, Candace. And you're more than welcome to disagree. I absolutely don't. I totally get that. I'm confused about my feelings regarding pedophiles and animal abusers. It's a strong feeling, and as it should be. I mean, as it really should be. I understand that, Jamie. And again, it's a real soul-searching thing to really go through and say whether or not we can understand that hate is a limiting factor in our own growth. That is what's holding us from being able to progress. It's holding us back from being able to change our vibration. So that's part of what I want. That's what I wanted the point I want to try to get across. So Alice says, I love it when you say we are all part of the same race, the human race. So true. Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate that, Alice. We are. There is the only race on this planet. So on that note, I want to thank everybody for joining in tonight. Thank you so much for sharing your comments and your feelings. I appreciate that too. I'm going to go ahead and say good evening. And we'll see you tomorrow for Lee Words Wednesday. And I can't wait to find out what Lee wants to talk about. It should be a lot of fun. So for everybody, I want to thank you very much from Cuenca, Ecuador. Thank you. Thank you, bro.
IPMNation.com.